big topics to cover, one from China and one from the US. But first, let's start with China. We'll be covering the McCarthy speakership related stories in the second half. First of all, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel and then also turn on your notification. We have new videos and shorts every single day pretty much. All right, so what's happening in China is there's a new protest. 20,000 workers have walked out to protest a sudden firing of about 10,000 plus workers in a Chinese pharmaceutical factory in southern China, in the city of Chongqing to be precise. And they're delaying payments as we're speaking, but some people are getting paid for the work, but people are angry again. So this is, of course, a series of protests we've seen in just the last few months. And let's kind of go into it right now. Okay, so what happened was on basically a day ago in China, so the morning of, I guess, would be the 5th, sorry, actually the 6th, because it would be a day ago would be the 6th. In China time, the Chongqing Dadukou Zhongyuan pharmaceutical company laid off more than 10,000 employees. And it looks something like this. So basically you had people come out, and again, the videos we're all getting, they're circulating on Twitter, of people walking out and protesting. We're getting numbers in the 20,000. And basically, they've actually gone and apparently destroyed a lot of the factory machines in the process, like this video shows here. They've gone in with bats and different kinds of objects, and they've gone into the factory where they worked, and they've caused a big stir. So police, of course, was dispatched initially. And it seems like now, as we proceed throughout the day, so as we go on, today will mark the second day, they've already clashed with the police in 2 nights. Okay, so we'll show you some of the videos here, but you can see they're definitely fed up with whatever the condition of the work they were in, either not getting paid or the sudden firing, letting go of 10,000 people is obviously, you're at the point where you don't have a job anymore. So these people do what they can to try to get some attention and try to have either the factory people aware of the situation, or they'll have the government involved. In China, it's usually the government. And at some point, we have, what happens is these type of workers, they're usually, this guy is a middleman. So they're usually hired by the middleman, some sort of like a hiring agency. And the agency will post the advertisement, which is like a hiring notice, tells them that, this is such a good job, you get paid this amount, you get these kind of benefits. And then once they get hired into the actual factory, they're not dealing directly with an employer, right? The employees go through the middleman. Unlike in other countries where you go apply for a job, it's usually the HR office of that particular company that deals with you, or is in like some places you have the manager directly hiring you, right? In China, a lot of these temporary workers have to go through a hiring agency, and some bloody scenes here, but basically you see like the whole scene is pretty wild. They're kind of like ganging up on this guy. I'm not so sure if he is the middleman. It says here he's the middleman, but he could also be a worker. We don't have the complete details here. And as this is going on, basically, we get something like this. This was the hiring notice that somebody found online and they put out. So apparently, according to this, they were hiring for production on nuclear acid tests, so COVID test, right? And they're asking for ages 16 to 43, doesn't matter gender. They're doing 2 shifts, so you're gonna do a morning shift and a night shift. Here's the salary. So it's $27 or 27 yuan an hour, which is about, I think, $3 converted to US. And then they have a night shift additional payment of 50 yuan a day, which is about 8-ish dollars, US dollars. And then a day you get about 300. So it works out to be about, I'd say like 80 to 90 US dollars. I'm just working this off the top of my head as to how much it is converted to the US dollars. 300 is still not a lot, even in China. Like 300 yuan is a typical bowl of like noodles cost you 15 yuan in China, right? So getting 300 is not that much. especially given the inflation and all that. And you're supposed to be paid the next month on the 15th of the next month. And they also say that they're not including any cost for eating and expenses and then living cost. So you're supposed to bring your own stuff. And so this obviously was the middleman's advertisement for the whole thing, right? Now this is obviously one of the triggers. More importantly though, when they were hired to work, they were fired, right? And remember, this is one of the series of protests we've seen recently in China. First, we saw the Foxconn protest, right? The iPhone factory in Henan, where you had potentially hundreds of thousands of workers walking out because of the condition there, because they were dealing with COVID patients all at the same time, forced to work in these grueling conditions. So a lot of people left. You had clashes with the police. Then the second round came in, right? Still in Foxconn. And then that second round also had a lot of clash with the police. And so this is becoming something very frequent in China. Then after the Foxconn, we got the, I believe it was the white paper protest, right? You had people holding up these A4 papers, and then they were protesting the Communist Party because of what happened in one apartment in Xinjiang, where the apartment fire killed, I think, 40-something people. And that caused a stir across China. You have people protesting in Shanghai and Beijing. And then after that, over the New Year's, we saw the fireworks protest, which I covered in a YouTube short yesterday. It was about people who basically were shooting up fireworks, something that's been banned in China, in order to release their frustration. And now we're getting this protest, which is, again, seems like it's over salary and payment. But in reality, I think people in China, they're starting to wake up to the idea that the Chinese Communist Party is not as scary as they seem. And so they're able to... I'd say they'll keep this steam going, right? Because I think within every person in China, they're starting to get this feeling of anger and frustration. Especially, I see it as this pressure cooker. And there's a lot of steam that needs to be let off. So people are looking for outlets to kind of vent their frustration and their resentment toward the regime, especially after 3 years of COVID, right? If you consider the fact that it used to be you had the government would persecute like religious groups and different dissidents. That didn't affect every single person in China. But the quarantine and the virus and the lockdowns did affect pretty much everybody in China, right? 1 billion people plus of Chinese people who are now, after 3 years of persecution, essentially, they're really fed up with what the Communist Party of China has been doing to the people. And I expect more protests to happen across China, scale like this, right? 20,000 people walking out. I think it's pretty remarkable, and especially given the fact that this is grassroots, this is not organized, right? There's no behind-the-scenes organization to protest. This isn't a revolution per se, but it's the idea that these spontaneous protests can happen in China is pretty remarkable, given the fact that nobody planned this. We'll see. I just think that there's a point that people have reached, and it's pretty scary for the Chinese Communist Party, to be honest. On one end, you're dealing still with the COVID situation in China, right? In the northern part of China, Beijing, Shanghai even, major cities across northern China, they're dealing with millions of people dying from COVID, which they're not telling us. And then you're dealing with people here in the south protesting, which puts a lot of pressure on the regime. So we'll see where this goes. But basically, as of now, from what I can gather in terms of the information, it seems to me that they have, let me find it here for you. They have gone, let's see. They've gone here, lined up for compensation. So it seems the pharmaceutical company has decided to pay them the compensation for the month of January. And so these are people lining up to pay. But throughout the night, there were some other videos showing the chaos. This is a scene where the people were standing off with police. Again, you can see that they're in riot gears, right? There's a ton of police presence whenever these kind of things happen, because the regime, remember, they always have to maintain stability, and that's like their core #1 goal. And then after that, there were some scenes that showed police getting beaten. I believe a bit after this. So more police showed up, and you see here they're getting, I believe they're getting chased away here. But the timeline is a little bit confusing because throughout the night there were videos posted, and then the people basically protested overnight. And then eventually, this is the part where that got pretty interesting. They cornered the police force. I don't think this is all the police that showed up, but this is a squad at least. And then they're being cornered and they're getting objects thrown at them. So again, like I said, these kind of things will continue to pop up in China in frequencies, I think, probably much higher than we would imagine. Somebody told me this, right? Like when the empire is about to fall, it might take a long time for them to reach there. And throughout this entire time, you feel like that, you know, there's the corruption, there's the despair, there's the suffering. But until you reach the point where it actually collapses, right? It's a long process, but the collapse itself is pretty quick. We saw that with the former Soviet Union, right? The Berlin Wall collapsing was pretty much an overnight thing. But given how long it took for the entirety of the Cold War to reach that point, right? 40 years until the collapse in 1991 of the Soviet Union. It took a long time. It felt like an eternity, right? But throughout the whole process, we slowly can observe the collapse within. It's kind of like if you have an apple, it's rotten within, right? You got worms, you got rotten like juice coming out of it. But what the CCP is trying to do right now is they're trying to keep the outside skin perfectly red or green if you have a Granny Smith, but they're trying to keep the skin perfectly perfect by wrapping it up in like saran wrap or something to try to keep it as fresh looking on the outside as possible. But within it, we know that it's rotten to the core, right? The apple itself is already done. It's just at some point when one of these points of the skin gets poked and the juice starts leaking out, the grossness starts coming out, that's going to be a really fast process. So I think that's what we're expecting now. We'll see more of this happening. But that's the story number one. So that's how China, 20,000 workers have walked out and protested in southern China over payments.